Matt, what you're describing is people who just live a gender different than the one they were assigned at birth. Whether they are non-binary, whether they are trans, whether they are anything, it doesn't matter. These people live their life and largely do not harm other people. Guys, it's important that we talk about Matt Walsh a lot, because the man speaks to a lot of people, and I may not like that, but some of the things he says get internalized by those people, and then those people take that internalized idea and then parrot it themselves, or live and breathe and believe it. The idea here on display is how he feels about kids coming out as trans, and I think it's important to talk about how not to be a shitty parent. But before we get into any of that, let's get into the fan art section. This one is from Lisby. Neko Suris with slime powers of some kind. Just thought it would be something cool. You know what? Honestly, it is something cool. It is. I love... So, like, my favorite ways to portray my character are ones where I am shifting in between slime and not slime. But that's why my stream starting soon screen right now. It's why it's that. Because I really like the transformation stuff. Yes, cool. That's it. The next one we have here is from Darth Strax 1111. This is what I think Suris would look like as a Red Lantern. It's not typical for his fan art, but it's the first thing that popped into my mind. I don't know if there's really a good typical for my fan art. I don't. But you know what? Red Lanterns are cool. They're Angie boys. I like. With that said, though, thank you all for your fan art submissions. If you want your fan art to be shown in a future video, the best way to do so is to drop it into the fan art section of the Discord. With that said, let's go ahead and get into the topic at hand. So, as I said, Matt Walsh, he has some things to say about kids that are trans and how to parent them. So let's go ahead and take a listen here and see how that turned out.
I have personally heard from many parents, more than I can count, who tell me versions of the same horror story.
Okay.
A beautiful and innocent kid, one day, seemingly out of nowhere,
Robalern, thank you for resubscribing,
gets sucked into the gender cult and is devoured by it.
Wait, okay, so let's go ahead and do a couple things here. One, what is the gender cult? I know the idea here is that there's some giant monolithic view on what gender is and how people experience it, which is not true. If you've been on the left for any amount of time, you know that we infight over everything, including fucking gender and pronouns. But okay, gender cult, sure. Let's go ahead and pretend that's a real thing. Who's the leader of the gender cult? Most cults usually have to have a figurehead of some kind, and then need to be able to exhibit some of the things we would classically find on the Byte model. So, where's the figurehead, Matt? Where's the person pulling those strings? I'm sorry, I refuse to believe in whatever the fuck the gender cult is. But what he's really saying is he's using hyperbole and he's using scary words to just communicate that there are some kids that believe what is considered currently the consensus on gender, that gender is a social construct that has ties to biology in some way, shape, or form, but we are not 100% certain on how far those ties go. We have seen things like people's identity tying into the amount of gray or white matter that we are able to measure in the craniums of cadavers, and they seem to line up more with the people's identity than it seems to line up with whatever they were assigned at birth. We do have some genetic markers here and there, but by and large, we agree that gender, for the most part, is a social construct. Anybody who believes in that is somebody who's indoctrinated into the gender cult, according to Matt Walsh, even though that's kind of a useless description, because that's like saying that Yu-Gi-Oh players are part of the Yu-Gi-Oh cult, or Magic the Gathering players are part of the Magic the Gathering cult. And I mean, sure, if you want to go all hail Gavin Verhey, then yeah, maybe at that point you've got a cult, but I'm sorry, I don't think that that's really what that is. That's just a community of people. That is a grouping of people that believe similar things. That doesn't necessarily make them a cult, but continue.
The child they held as a baby and raised and gave their lives to and loved and still love becomes suddenly unrecognizable.
You know, that happens to everybody. It's called growing up. Your child being unrecognizable is a thing that can happen for a variety of reasons. Being trans is not the only one, but okay.
All of their innocence and light and beauty just drained out of them.
Yeah, again, that's just called being an adult.
Replaced by this self-cannibalizing madness.
How is it self-cannibalizing madness? So I have seen trans people who I really, really, really did not like. Not because they were trans, but because they were so far into a variant of extremism that I did not like, or they were called Buck Angel or Blair White. There are people in all sides and walks of life that I do not like, that I think have been subsumed and destroyed by an ideology. That does not necessarily mean that that was because they are trans. Matt, what you're describing is people who just live a gender different than the one they were assigned at birth. Whether they are non-binary, whether they are trans, whether they are anything, it doesn't matter. These people live their life and largely do not harm other people unless they are provoked into it first. I know that there are people who have particular opinions on the usage of violence in response to words, but I'm sorry, people like Hitler only used words, and somehow a lot of people died as a result of that. Words have power when they are held by the right people. You can say what you want about violence, and I can say what I want about self-defense. But when you talk about people consumed by an ideology, Matt, most of the time, if people are consumed by trans ideology, whatever that actually manifests as, the reason for that usually is that they have been pushed into that. Do you know how you create an extremist? You ostracize them from most other groups. You make it to where the only group they have is the extreme. If you do that, the minute that you start creating that for them, it is no wonder that people will fall into extremism. So how would you ostracize a trans person? Well, very, very simply. Deny their existence as a fucking trans person. That's how you start moving a trans person further and further into extremism. Of course, they're going to, instead of existing in standard spaces where everybody is comfortable being with one another, they're going to move into more extreme spaces that are more echo chambery because those are the only places they have left, because you are engaging in language that ostracizes them. Yeah, some people may choose to leave the country, but people who are stuck here will sometimes find themselves in political extremism. And we have an extremism problem on the left and the right. I'm not here to do the, her enlightened centrist thing. Right now we're talking about expressly Matt Walsh upset that people either are part of a quote, gender ideology or find themselves further down that line than he would be comfortable with. But I'm here to say that people like Matt Walsh are the reason people find themselves further down that line.
For a parent, to see this happen to a child, it is a fate worse than death. I would rather be dead than have that happen to my kids.
You would rather be dead than find out your child is trans? That's what you just said. You would rather be dead than have a kid come to you and tell you that their gender is different than the one that they were born with. Why would you rather die? Why would you rather be dead than have your child be comfortable enough to you to talk to you about their identity? There's an aspect of my identity that I was terrified about revealing to my parents. And I really only ever revealed it to my mom because I'm still terrified of revealing it to more of my family. But those who watch my channel, you know I'm polyamorous. I can exist in a monogamous relationship, and I can exist in a polyamorous relationship. I can feel compersion. The fact that I can exist in a polyamorous relationship and the fact that I would pursue a relationship like that with people, it's very hard to keep that under wraps from people in your family, especially when the people that you're dating are living with you. But to this day, the only one in my family that knows I'm poly is my mom, because I don't feel comfortable with that conversation with other members of my family. And luckily, she's the only one in my family that really watches my channel, so I'm pretty safe here. You would rather somebody live a life in fear of explaining to you that they feel differently than how you would have them feel. You would rather them not do that, because the alternative for you would be just being dead.
See, the thing that I most despise about Dylan Mulvaney is that he is part of a movement which actively seeks to turn my children into Dylan Mulvaney.
No, the trans movement, by and large, does not want to make people trans. The trans movement, by and large, wants to provide a world where people can be trans. That's different. Wanting to create a world where it's considered normal to be trans, just as it's currently normal to be cis, is not the same fucking thing as forcing your kid to be trans. Nobody's grabbing your kid, pulling them into the bathroom and going, hey there, little boy. Hey there. Have you ever thought maybe you'd like goyle parts? Nobody's fucking doing that. Nobody's fucking doing that. Charlie, thank you about the 10 bits. My mom told me to just embrace my femininity when discussing my transness. Yeah, ignoring the fact that there's masculine women who embrace the masculine aspects of themselves. Like, that's the thing. Gender is a sloppy thing. There are masculine women. There are feminine men. There are trans men who identify as femme boys because they don't want to abandon their femininity simply because their gender is not the same as the one that is commonly associated with it. There are people who have complaints about Dylan Mulvaney. And the way that she operates as a trans person on TikTok. And I can understand there being arguments about that, but that's not the same thing as a person trying to indoctrinate your children into being trans so that you can I mean what would that be? Would that be the 4D chess thing? You want a world without Matt Walsh, so you get Matt Walsh's kids to be trans because he's already told you what he would do if that happened? Is that the 4D chess play? Convert Matt Walsh's kids so that the world has less Matt Walsh? Is that what we do?
That's why I'm entitled to my anger and to whatever language I use to convey it.
Okay, so yes, you are entitled to your anger. Everybody's emotions are valid. You're entitled. But the language you use, the words you choose to convey that anger with, I would argue not, because the emotion is valid, but the way you communicate that emotion now starts affecting other people. That's not the same thing, and I'm not comfortable with that anymore.
I will say whatever I want to say, and I will be justified in saying it, because these people are after my kids.
Nobody's after your kids. We'll make jokes about it, but nobody's actually after your kids.
And yours.
No, nobody's coming for my kids. I don't have kids.
And everyone else's. And you're worried that I'm being a little rude?
You're not just being rude. You've literally called for people to die. You've called for people who deal drugs to die. You've called for people on the streets to die. You've created an environment where it is more likely for trans people to die, either from suicide or because other people have killed them. Yeah, no, we're not saying you're a little rude. We're saying you're a fucking theocratic fascist. Then again, you also say that you're a theocratic fascist, so.
Well, you see, when it comes to my children, the children that I cherish more than my own life, if you think mean words go too far, then you would be very shocked to hear how far I would really go to protect them.
Oh, I would love to see you go very far, Matt. I would love to see you go so far that you end up in jail forever. I would love that. That would be the greatest thing in the world. For me, personally. Personal catharsis, right there for it.
Trust me, words are the least of it.
Uh-huh. So, I'm just going to go ahead and say, a common tactic from abusers, when you tell them that, hey, this thing you're doing is harmful, a common tactic they will use is say, oh, harm? You want to see what can cause harm? You haven't seen harm. I could have done this, or I will do this. Those are tactics of abusers. Those are things that people who are willing to hurt people use as justification for the hurt they've already caused. I think it's very telling that Matt says that he would rather be dead than have a kid who is trans. There's nothing wrong with having a kid who grows up and realizes they're trans, or having a kid that realizes they're trans early on and then seeks transition into adulthood. There's nothing wrong with these things. These are natural things that happen all the time. I mean, not all the time. Trans people are a minority in the population, but you know what I mean. The fact of the matter is, Matt, if your kid is trans, because you said the things you did, they will almost never feel comfortable coming out to you, and because they will be public figures as they are attached to you, they will probably never be comfortable coming out at all and will live a life of torture as a result. And that is if they happen to be trans. I don't know if they are. Statistically, not likely, but if it happened to be the case, and I hope it is, you are literally creating the worst world for them. Not just within your own household, but because you have such a big platform, you create that world going forward. Can you imagine the amount of good that would be done by Matt Walsh if he just suddenly flipped the switch one day and became super trans positive? Can you imagine the cultural zeitgeist flip if that happened to the entirety of Daily Wire? Can you imagine that? I could imagine. I could imagine a world filled with nothing but love for people who just want to live their life as they are. and by living their life publicly, don't have to think that other people are saying that they're indoctrinating people into it. But anyway. Mr. Whiskers, thank you for the resubscription. Guys, with that, let me know in the comment section below what you think about Matt and all this shit. Let me know what comes on your mind when you think of what trans indoctrination is. Because it's not just people existing as trans and explaining their experience as being trans. That's not indoctrination. That's just being public about your fucking life. Doggy, thank you for the 40-bit, said, I wish medical science was not political. I wish it wasn't either. But Bill Nye said it best when he said that no, science is very political. It shouldn't be, but it is. But with that said, let me know what you think in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you haven't already. And as always, everybody, insert end of video tagline here.